Hello, everyone, and welcome back to AI-Praxis Design Thinking Program. So far, we have empathized with users, defined the right problem, generated ideas, and built our first prototype. Now comes the moment that many teams either look forward to or secretly fear. That is testing. So today, we are not here to prove that our idea is brilliant. We're here, in fact, to discover where it actually breaks. Because every moment of confusion, hesitation, or unexpected behavior is valuable feedback. Remember, the goal of testing is not validation, it is learning. So, in this session, you will learn how to test your prototype with real users, capture meaningful feedback, and decide what to improve next. By the end of today's session, you will have a complete feedback grid and one clear evidence-based improvement to carry into the next stage of design thinking. So up to this point, I think everything you've created has been based on assumptions. You have empathized with users, defined a problem, generated ideas, and built a prototype. But until a real user interacts with it, you still don't know whether your solution actually works. Today, we change that. Testing is one of the most misunderstood stages of design thinking. Many people think testing is about, asking users, "Do you like my idea?" Isn't? Good testing is about observing what people actually do, not what they say they would do. For example, in usability research, users often report that a website is easy to use, yet observation shows they repeatedly click the wrong button or struggle to complete a task. Their behavior reveals the real problem, not their opinion. So that's why today's session focuses on structured observation instead of discussion. We will begin with the three rules of user testing: show, don't explain; listen, don't defend; and observe, don't guide. These rules prevent us from unintentionally influencing the user. Next, we will understand why even a small number of users can uncover the majority of usability issues when testing is done correctly. This principle comes from usability research by Jacob Nielsen and Thomas Londor. You will then learn the Stanford Design School feedback grid, which is a simple framework that converts a raw comment into actionable insight. After that, you will conduct two live testing rounds using your prototype. During these sessions, your only job is to observe carefully and record what users say, do, hesitate over, or ignore. We will then debrief as a team, in fact, to identify the single most important improvement to make. Because great design improves one evidence-based decision at a time, not through random changes. Finally, we will use AI to synthesize the feedback into a prioritized list of improvements, helping you prepare the next stage, that is iteration. By the end of today's session, you don't just have feedback, you will have a clear direction for making your solution better. Now, before we begin testing, we need to understand the one important principle. The biggest threat to a user test is not a bad prototype, it's actually the designer. Without realizing it, we naturally want to help. We explain features, justify design decisions, or point users in the right direction. Every one of these actions changes the outcome of the test. And that's why professional designers follow three simple rules. The first one: show, don't explain. When you hand your prototype to someone, simply say, "Please interact with this naturally," as if you discovered it on your own. Then stop talking. Yes. Imagine you're testing a new food delivery app. If you immediately say the order button is at the bottom right and you can track your delivery from the next screen, you've already taught the user how to succeed. But if they naturally struggle to find the order button, that's valuable information. It tells you the interface isn't communicating clearly, because end of the day, you would have thought to make it very intuitive, right? A good product shouldn't require a tutorial for basic tasks. Rule number 2, listen and don't defend. Suppose the tester says, I don't understand what this screen is asking me to do. Your instinct might be to respond immediately. That's how human beings are. Actually, what we meant was, so don't do that, okay? Don't do that. Don't use such kind of phrases. The moment you start explaining, you have actually removed the very confusion you needed to observe. Companies like Airbnb, Google, and Microsoft routinely record moments of user confusion because these reveal where the design needs improvement, not where users need more instruction. So remember one thing: confusion is actually evidence for you, and it's not criticism. Rule number 3 is observe and don't guide. People often reveal more through actions than through words. A tester may confidently say everything was easy, but during the session you notice they paused for 15 seconds before clicking a button, ignored an important feature entirely, or repeatedly tapped the wrong option. Which should you trust? That's the question, the behavior. So, this idea forms the foundation of the Think Aloud protocol, widely used in user experience research and popularized by Jacob Nielsen. Users verbalize their thoughts while interacting, and observers simply watch and record without intervening. If you remember only one thing from today's session, remember this: don't try to make your prototype look successful. Try to make your learning successful. The quality of a test is determined not by how much of the user likes your idea, but by how honestly they reveal what needs to improve. So let's explore the first rule in some detail, okay, which was show, don't explain. Now, this sounds simple, but it's probably the hardest habit to develop. As creators, we're emotionally attached to our ideas. When someone looks confused, our first instinct is to help. We start explaining features, pointing at buttons, or describing what the product is supposed to do. The problem is that the moment we explain, we are no longer testing the product, we are testing our explanation. Think about everybody, in fact, everyday products you already use. Imagine buying a new electric kettle. If someone has to stand beside you and explain how to boil water, the product has actually failed. Good design communicates through the product itself. The same principle applies to digital products. Suppose you have designed a student budgeting app. A user opens the home screen and stares for several seconds without knowing how to add an expense. You might feel tempted to say, just click the plus button. Instead, stay silent. That hesitation tells you something important. Perhaps the plus button is too small. Perhaps it blends into the background. Or perhaps users expect the feature somewhere else. Those few seconds of silence reveal a design flaw that no survey could uncover. Steve Krug, in his well known usability book, Don't Make Me Think, argues that interfaces should be self explanatory. Yes, users shouldn't have to stop and figure out what to do next, when to do next. Okay, it's usually a signal that the design can be improved. This is why companies like Google and Apple conduct usability tests where facilitators speak very little. They observe the first interaction because first impressions cannot be recreated once a hint has been given. So during testing, your role is not to teach, your role is to watch. Let the prototype do the talking. If users understand it immediately, that's evidence your design is working. If they won't, you have discovered exactly what needs to improve, and that's a successful test. The second rule is just as important, which is listen, don't defend. Receiving criticism is really uncomfortable, whether it's a product, a presentation, a business idea. We naturally want to explain why something happened. But during testing, your explanation is the enemy of learning. Imagine you've designed an app that helps people, book doctor's appointments. A tester says, I wasn't sure whether my appointment, was actually confirmed. You may immediately think the confirmation message appears after 5 seconds, or you probably missed the notification. Resist the urge. Instead, write down exactly what the user said. Because if one user feels uncertain, how many others, in fact, probably will do. Healthcare providers spend enormous effort making critical information unmistakably clear, because uncertainty can lead to missed appointments or medication errors. The problem isn't that users aren't paying attention. It's that the design isn't communicating effectively. Another example comes from online shopping. Suppose someone says, I wasn't sure whether this item was added to my cart. Rather than explaining the animation or notification, product teams treat this as a usability issue. Many e commerce platforms now use stronger visual confirmation, such as changing the cart icon, displaying a success message, or updating the item count instantly, because testing repeatedly shows that users needed clearer feedback. Notice the pattern. The user's comment is not an attack on your idea. It's evidence about the experience. So professional user experience, researchers often say, don't correct the participant, correct the product. Every moment of confusion is pointing you toward an improvement. So during testing, become a recorder rather than a speaker. Capture the user's exact words. Don't argue. Don't justify. Don't persuade. Sometimes the most valuable sentence you will hear is simply, I don't understand. That single sentence may save weeks of development by revealing a problem while it's still inexpensive to fix. Remember, feedback is a gift only if you resist the temptation to explain it away. The third rule is simple, but it often reveals the most valuable insights. Observe, don't guide. So during testing, your eyes are often more important than your ears. People don't always describe their experiences accurately, but their behavior rarely lies. Imagine you're observing someone using an ATM for the first time. The person may eventually withdraw cash successfully and say, it was fine. But you notice they searched for the card slot, paused before choosing an option, and almost cancelled the transaction because they couldn't find the confirmation button. Those moments of hesitation are usability problems, even if the user doesn't mention them. This is why user experience researchers or UX researchers pay close attention to behavior. Where did the user click first? Where did they completely ignore? Which screen made them pause? When did they smile or frown? These observations often reveal more than direct feedback. A famous example comes from Amazon. During usability testing, researchers discovered that users were abandoning purchases not because they disliked the products, but because the it's the checkout process actually felt confusing and required unnecessary effort. By simplifying the checkout experience, including innovations such as one click ordering, Amazon significantly reduced friction and improved conversions. The lesson wasn't discovered through surveys, it was discovered by watching people struggle. So, this is also the principle behind the Think Aloud protocol developed by usability expert Jacob Nielsen. Instead of asking users questions every few seconds, researchers simply ask them to think aloud while uh, completing a task. For example, I'm looking for the search button. I thought this icon meant settings, something like that. I am not sure what happens if I click here. These spontaneous thoughts help designers understand what users expect, where they become uncertain, and why they make certain decisions. Notice what the facilitator does throughout the session. Nothing, no hints, no pointing, no suggestions. Because the moment you say, try clicking that button, you have changed the user's natural behavior. You're no longer observing reality, you're creating it. Remember this principle. If users need guidance to complete a task, the design needs improvement, not the user. Great testing isn't about helping people succeed, it's about discovering why they don't. One question comes up in almost every design thinking workshop, and that is, how many users do we need to test with? So the instinctive answer is usually as many as possible. But decades of usability research suggest something different. In 1993, usability researchers Jacob Nielsen and Thomas Landor um, studied how usability problems are discovered during testing. Their research showed that the first few users uncover the majority of the most important usability issues. Later, Nielsen popularized this finding as the 5 user rule. Yes, 5 user rule, explaining that testing with around 5 representative users typically reveals about 85% of usability problems. Why does this happen? Because users often encounter the same obstacles. Imagine you're testing a university course registration website. The first student struggles to find the register button. The second student makes the same mistake. The third student hesitates at exactly the same point. By now, you don't need 20 more students to tell you the button isn't visible enough. The pattern is already clear. Think of it like proofreading a document. The first reader catches the biggest spelling mistakes. The second reader finds a few more. By the 10th reader, you're mostly hearing the same comments again. The value of each additional participant gradually decreases, a concept known as diminishing returns. Yes, this is called diminishing returns. Now, in today's session, we don't have 5 users. We'll have 2 testing rounds. Uh, does that make the exercise less valuable? Not at all. The first tester helps you discover obvious problems. And of course, the caution is while you're watching, you need to be in teams, as I mentioned, but you can still simulate if you want at your convenience. The second tester tells you whether those problems are consistent or whether they were unique to one individual. If both testers struggle with the same feature, you have found a strong signal that something needs to change. Remember, design thinking is iterative. You're not trying to discover every issue in one session. You're trying to learn enough to improve the next session. So it's far better to conduct 2 thoughtful, well observed tests than 10 rushed conversations where everyone is interrupted or guided. Quality of observation always matters more than the quantity of participants. So don't worry about testing with hundreds of people today if you're watching. Focus on observing a few people carefully, because one genuine moment of hesitation can teach you more than 100 compliments. Now that we have collected observations, the next challenge is making sense of them. If you simply ask people, so what did you think? You will observe, that you're getting very vague answers like it was good or I liked it. Helpful? Not really. Good testing doesn't end with collecting feedback, it ends with organizing feedback into insights that lead to better design. And that's exactly why the Stanford D.school or Stanford Design School developed the feedback grid. Instead of treating all comments equally, it separates them into 4 categories. The first category is I like. This captures what users genuinely appreciated. For example, imagine you're testing a food donation app. A tester says, I like that I could donate surplus food in just 2 steps. That tells you something worth preserving. When multiple users independently praise the same feature, it's a signal that you have created real value. Remember, testing isn't only about finding problems, it's also about identifying strengths you should never remove. The second is I wish. This is constructive criticism. Instead of saying your app is bad, users often express needs more naturally. For example, I wish I could see how long the volunteer will take to arrive. Notice the difference. The tester isn't rejecting the idea, they're pointing to an opportunity for improvement. The best product teams actively look for I wish statements because they often become the roadmap for the next version. Third, what if? Yes, it is what if. So, this is where creativity enters the conversation. Users sometimes suggest ideas the design team never considered. For example, what if I could donate food to a specific NGO instead of the nearest one? Will every suggestion be implemented? The answer is no. But some of the world's most successful product improvements have originated from unexpected user suggestions. Treat these as possibilities, not commitments. Finally, the last one, it is questions. So questions reveal uncertainty. Imagine a user asks, what happens if nobody accepts my donation? Or is my personal information visible to everyone? These aren't random questions. They're highlighting parts of the experience that are not communicating clearly. Very often, the questions users ask become the next design problems you need to solve. So the beauty of the feedback grid is its balance. It doesn't focus only on positives. It doesn't focus only on criticism. It captures appreciation, improvement opportunities, new ideas, and areas of confusion all in one frame. In a very simple manner, you can see the grid. By the end of your testing session, you shouldn't walk away saying people liked it. You should walk away with a feedback grid full of evidence that tells you exactly what to keep, what to improve, what to explore, and what to clarify. That's how great products evolve, not through opinions, but through structured learning. So, one challenge in user testing is that many people don't know how to give useful feedback. Yeah, that's true. If you simply ask, what do you think? You'll often hear answers like, it's nice, looks good, right, pretty okay. These responses are polite, but they don't help you improve your design. That's why experienced facilitators give users sentence starters. Yes, I call them sentence starters. They reduce the pressure of thinking about how to respond, allowing users to focus on what they experienced. Okay, let's look at each category. I like. So ask users to begin with, I like how, or I really appreciate it. For example, I like how I could complete the booking without creating an account. This tells you exactly which feature created value. Look at the second one, that is, I wish. Here, users might say, I wish the instructions were simpler, or I wish I could compare two products before confusing. So, notice that these sentences aren't complaints, they're opportunities. So, companies like Spotify, Airbnb, Duolingo continually collect I wish feedback because it often reveals the next feature users genuinely need. What if? This encourages creative thinking. Users might say, what if I could save my progress and continue later? Or what if the app recommended options based on my previous choices? Not every suggestion should be implemented, but sometimes one simple idea changes an entire product. For example, features like dark mode, undo send in email, and offline downloads in streaming platforms are all becoming popular because users consistently asked for them. Then comes the questions. Finally, encourage users to ask questions naturally. For example, what happens if I lose my internet connection? Who can see my data? Can I change this later? Questions are extremely valuable because they reveal uncertainty. Whenever multiple users ask the same question, it is often a sign that the interface isn't communicating clearly. As a facilitator, your goal is not to collect compliments. Your goal is to collect specific observations. These sentence starters help transform vague opinions into structured, actionable feedback. So by the end of this session, your feedback grid should contain clear evidence, not guesses, about how your prototype can become better. Now it's time to stop discussing the prototype and start learning from it. This is round one of your user testing. Everything we have covered so far comes together in this exercise. Now, before the test begins, assign clear roles. One person will be the tester. The rest of the team, if you're already watching, as I mentioned, will become observers. Okay. Notice, I didn't say presenters. Okay. Your job is not to sell the idea. Your job is to learn. Hand the prototype to the tester and use exactly the same instruction every time. Say, here is something we have been working on. Please interact with it naturally, just as you would if no one were watching. Then stop talking. For the next 5 minutes, your only responsibility is to observe. Watch carefully. Where does the user begin? Uh, watch, what catches their attention first? Which elements do they ignore? Where do they pause? Do they smile? Do they look confused? Try something unexpected? These behaviors often reveal more than the words they speak. If you're using the Think Aloud protocol, encourage the tester before the session begins to simply describe what they're thinking. For example, I'm not sure what this button does. I expected something different to happen. I think the screen is asking me to blah, blah, blah. These comments help you understand how the user is interpreting your design, not how you intended it to work. After approximately 5 minutes, ask only two open-ended questions. What surprised you most and what would you change? Notice what you're not asking, right? You're not asking something like, did you like it or would you buy this? Those questions encourage opinions. Instead, we are looking for observations that can improve the design. So as soon as the conversation ends, don't rely on memory. Immediately capture everything in your feedback grid. Record the user's exact words whenever possible. Avoid summarizing or interpreting. For example, instead of writing, user found navigation confusing. Right? I wasn't sure where to click next. Because in the earlier sentence, you're actually giving some answer. But in the second one, you're trying to create a curiosity saying that you didn't know. And what's the next step, right? So the exact wording actually preserves valuable context and reduces your own bias. Now remember, this first testing round is not about proving your prototype works. It's about discovering what you couldn't see while you were designing it. The more curious you are, the more valuable this session will become. Then, second one, as I mentioned, live testing round two. At first glance, this may seem like a repeat of the previous activity, but it's actually not. The purpose of the second round is to answer an important question. And the question is, was the first user's experience unique or is it a pattern? In research, a single observation is interesting. When multiple people experience the same problem independently, it actually becomes evidence. That's exactly what we're looking for. Begin exactly as before. Use the same introduction, follow the same rules, give the same instructions, ask the same closing questions, because changing the process changes the results. If you explain more to the second tester or ask different questions, you won't know whether the difference came from the prototype or from your testing method. Professional, in fact, researchers call this consistency. Okay, the testing conditions should remain the same for every participant, so that differences in behavior come from the users, not the facilitator. Now observe carefully. Did the second tester hesitate at the same screen as the first one? Right? Did they misunderstand the same feature? Or did they uncover an entirely different issue? For example, imagine you're testing the online appointment booking system. The first tester struggles to find the book now button. You might think it was just that, that person's mistake. But if the second tester also spends time searching for the same button, you have identified a genuine usability problem. On the other hand, suppose a second tester completes the task easily, but asks, can I reschedule my appointment later? Now you have discovered a new insight that never appeared in round one. Both outcomes are valuable. One confirms an existing issue, the other reveals a new opportunity. After the session, complete the feedback grid for the second tester before comparing it with the first. Avoid combining feedback too early. Keeping each user's observations separate helps you identify recurring patterns more accurately. Finally, compare the two grids. Ask yourself which comments appeared in both sessions, which problems were repeated, which strengths were consistently appreciated, which suggestion, and note, I use the term strengths, not features, which suggestions appeared only once. These patterns are far more valuable than isolated opinions. So remember, great design decisions are not based on the loudest voice in the room. They are based on consistent evidence collected from real users. That's exactly what round two helps you discover. Now the testing is complete. Okay. And now comes the most important part, making sense of what you have learned. As a team, discuss one simple question. What surprised us the most? Often the biggest insight isn't what users like. It's what they struggled with that you never expected. Next, identify one improvement to carry forward, not five, not 10, just one high impact change, because it should be completely based on strongest evidence from your testing. For example, if both testers couldn't find the main action button, improving its visibility is far more valuable than changing colors or fonts. Remember, design thinking is iterative. Each round of testing should lead to one meaningful improvement, which becomes the starting point for the next iteration. And that's how great products evolve, one evidence based decision at a time. So you've gathered valuable feedback. Now it's time to organize it. Instead of reading dozens of notes manually, AI can help you identify patterns much faster. Simply provide your prototype description, your HMW, that is how might we question, and feedback from all the four sections of your feedback grid. Ask AI these four questions. What's the most critical problem to fix? What is the strongest signal of value? What are the top five improvements? Does the solution still answer the original how might we question? For example, if multiple users said they were unsure how to begin, AI will likely identify onboarding or navigation as the highest priority improvement. However, remember one important principle. AI summarizes your feedback, it doesn't replace your judgment. So always review the recommendations critically. Your understanding of the users and the context in what turns AI insights into better design decisions. So let's look at a real example of how the feedback grid helps teams make better design decisions. So you may recall from the previous session, Aryan's team tested an AI confusion, companion for first generation college students. The feedback was balanced. One tester said, I liked that I didn't have to explain everything. This showed that the experience felt simple and approachable. Another said, I wish the response felt, now remember, it started with I wish. The response felt less like a template. That highlighted an opportunity to make the AI feel more natural and empathetic. A third suggestion was, what if it remembered what I shared earlier? This introduced a new feature idea around continuity and personalization. And finally, both testers asked a similar question: is this really anonymous? Now, this became the most important insight. The team realized that privacy wasn't just a technical feature, it had to be communicated clearly. As a result, they decided to display the anonymity guarantee prominently on the first screen so that you will be actually assured as a user Notice that the final design decision wasn't based on the loudest opinion. It was based on a pattern that appeared across multiple users. That's exactly how the feedback grid transforms comments into actionable improvements. Even experienced designers make mistakes during user testing. The most common mistake is explaining the prototype before the user has a chance to explore it. The moment you explain, you have influenced the outcome. The second mistake, if you look at, is defending the design. If a user says they're confused, don't justify the interface, record the feedback. Remember, confusion is data. Okay, please. So the third mistake is guiding the user. Pointing to the correct button or suggesting the next step turns a usability test into a training session. Finally, during the debrief, teams often focus only on positive comments. Instead, pay special attention to the feedback that was difficult to hear. Those insights usually lead to the biggest improvements. So you should remember, the purpose of testing is not to improve or in fact not to prove your design is right. It's to discover how to make it better. Now, it's time to evaluate the quality of your testing, not the quality of your prototype. Yes, quality of testing. So there are two things to assess. First, did the team follow the testing protocol? And this is very important for all the product managers, product team, leaders, right? Did they? So you can ask this: did they remain silent? Did they avoid explaining or defending? Did they capture the user's exact words? The second one is the feedback actionable? That's very important because end of the day, you to incorporate. So good feedback grid contains observations across all four sections and ends with one clear design improvement supported by evidence. So you should remember that success is not measured by whether users loved the prototype. It will be measured by how much the team learned and whether that learning can be used to improve the next version. A well-run test always produces one thing: a better direction for iteration. So one of the most effective techniques in user testing is the Think Aloud protocol developed by usability expert Jacob Nielsen. I have already talked about that, but let me explain to you. So the idea is very simple here. As users interact with your prototype, ask them to say whatever they're thinking. Yes. Ask them to say whatever they're thinking. For example, I'm looking for the search button. I'm not sure what this icon means. I expected something different to happen. These thoughts help you understand how users think, not just what they do. And therefore, you can see the heading. I mean, the Think Aloud protocol. Okay. So whether you're testing online through screen sharing or offline with a paper prototype, the rule remains the same. The user speaks, the user listens, and takes notes. Avoid asking leading questions or interrupting the user. So leading questions are like, do you think that the design is better? So either you'll have a yes or you'll have a no, right? So please don't ask such kind of questions. Remember, the goal isn't to hear the right answers. It's to understand the user's natural thought process. So today's session introduced three widely used tools in design thinking and user experience. The first one is the feedback grid from Stanford Design School, which helps organize user feedback into four categories: I like, I wish, what if, and questions. It turns conversations into actionable insights. The second is the Think Aloud protocol, developed by Jacob Nielsen, where users verbalize their thoughts while interacting with a prototype. And this helps uncover confusion, expectations, and usability issues that might otherwise go unnoticed. The third is the show don't tell testing protocol used by IDEO and the Stanford Design School. It reminds us to show the prototype, listen without defending, and observe without guiding. These are not just classroom techniques, right? They're used by product teams around the world to build products that they meet, user needs. So as you continue your design thinking journey, these tools will help you make decisions based on evidence rather than assumptions. So let's conclude this session with 5 important lessons that we have learned. First is real users are the best source of feedback. Assumptions end when testing begins. The second one is show your prototype, don't explain it, listen carefully and don't defend it. Honest reactions are far more valuable than polite agreement. The third one is observe behavior, not just words. So, where users hesitate, what they ignore, and what they expect often reveal the biggest opportunities for improvement. Fourth one is use the feedback grid to organize feedback into clear, actionable insights. A structured approach always beats relying on memory. Finally, use AI to synthesize patterns because AI will do it in few seconds, right? Use ChatGPT, put your feedback, that entire feedback grid, get the result. So prioritize improvements and prepare for the next iteration. Of course, always you should apply your own judgment. So you should remember that testing doesn't tell you whether your idea is perfect. It tells you how to make it better. Congratulations, you have completed session 5 test, right? So we started with empathize, then define, then ideate, then prototype and test the entire design thinking process. But we'll definitely have 2 more that we will add and we'll continue in the next session. So today you transformed a prototype into something far more valuable, a source of real user insights. Now, before we move to the next stage, take moments to reflect. What piece of feedback surprised you the most? What was the hardest comment to hear? And most importantly, what's the one change you will make before testing again? So you should remember that every successful product from Airbnb to Google Maps to Canva has gone through countless rounds of testing and refinement. Great products aren't created in a single attempt, they evolve through continuous learning. So in the next session, which is S6, iterate, we will use the evidence you have gathered today to improve your solution, refine your prototype, and move closer to solving the user's problem. Until then, keep one principle in mind. Don't fall in love with your first solution. Fall in love with the learning from your users. Thank you, and I will see you in session 6, iterate.